Hey guys, it's AC. Welcome to my house. And today we're going to talk about single family portfolio investing and this exciting show today. So thanks for tuning in live. I appreciate it. Thanks to those listening on the podcast, House of AC podcast. And thanks to those who are watching this later on the House of AC YouTube show or YouTube channel and the House of AC um, Facebook group. It's just got started to host the old videos, so please thank you for checking that out, liking the page. If you learn something here, and I promise you'll learn something here, please hit like and subscribe. Pretty good payment exchange system, unstoppable knowledge for you to grow your wealth, and you pay me in likes. So maybe I'm the one getting the raw end of that deal, but I enjoy it. We're going to talk about single family portfolios. What is a single family portfolio? Okay. A portfolio just means more than one property bundled together. So it could be two houses next door to each other. It could be two houses across town. It could be two houses across the country. It's a bundle. It's the way to think of it. It's called a portfolio. And I'm going to teach you 7 pros about single family portfolio investing and 7 cons about multifamily, single family. You can also bundle multifamily, small multifamily into that portfolio investing. I guess it doesn't have to be. It's just more than one property if you're buying a bundle. So one could be a commercial restaurant and another could be a duplex. And that's a portfolio of properties that you're buying. As long as they're being sold together and bought together, that's a portfolio. And so once I get through my 7 pros with you and I get through my 7 cons of single family portfolios and investing, I'm going to show you how to find them. All right. So you make the decision whether this is a pro for you or a con for you. So let's get to it. And if you don't know anything I say here, if you want to follow me and find me later, go to Linktree/the House of AC or all my social media channels at the House of AC. I try to entertain you there as well in bite-sized chunks. And here I try to keep the conversation going for about an hour. I do the best that I can, and I hope I get better at this as we go. You and me both probably think that. Okay, pros. Investing in single-family portfolios. Let's start. Pro number 1 is typically they probably already have property managers in place. You are an investor, real estate investor, and you are buying from another real estate investor. And a lot of times these portfolios, they could be spread out across town or they're sort of on autopilot at some point. And the seller of the property probably has the property managers in place. They've already got leases signed. It's really most of the time, not always, plug and play. It's really simple. You're just basically trading, buying into someone else's portfolio. And I should mention, I've bought multiple portfolios before. I've bought a portfolio. We had Damian Scott on, a business partner of mine. Now I bought a portfolio of his properties. It was a quadruplex, a triplex, and a quadruplex. So was it 11 units? They're all on the same street, 2 on one side of the street, 1 on the other. I bought that portfolio from him. I bought so that was a small multifamily portfolio, and that was very plug and play. He knew they're all rented out. He had the contractors who had worked on it, and I just basically took over his business. It's like buying a small business, and I'm not forced to use his resources and his vendors. I did because they were familiar with the building, and maybe over time I replaced 1 or 2 that I wanted to for whatever reason. Another portfolio I bought a 30 home portfolio from a retiring investor, which really opened up the doors for this was 30 single family homes. And then once I bought that, I had a reputation buying portfolios, and then everyone started bringing me their portfolio deals. And I bought someone else's portfolio of 3, and then someone's portfolio of 10, and then someone's portfolio of 6. And I eventually accumulated about 50 properties, all in the same town and about an hour south of Atlanta. So I'm very, very familiar with portfolio investing and the pros and cons. So when I get through the 7 pros and 7 cons here, you can understand where this is coming from. It's real life experience. But yeah, typically I'm trying to think, I think every single portfolio I bought had property managers in place. Doesn't mean they're the best property managers. I have kept some of the property managers that were in place. I've also replaced some of the property managers in place because I found that they were inadequate. And they might have worked for the previous owner, or maybe that property manager had a better relationship with the previous owner, or maybe the reason the previous owner was selling is because they couldn't manage the property manager. And so that is something, whenever you're in real estate investing, is it's really sort of figuring out the property manager that's going to manage it, because that's going to make or break it. You want them incentivized to make money, and so typically they charge 10% of the rental income, and so that means if the property is vacant, they make nothing, and they're also incentivized to gradually increase rent and keep tenants in there so that they get paid. And you may have to short-term property manage it yourself. That's part of the business as well. Just like if you were to buy a franchise, Papa John's franchise, I think like Peyton Manning and Shaquille O'Neal own like 20, franchises of Papa John's. If their manager quits, they better have another manager to step in, or they may have to step in and run some meetings and cook some pizzas. That's sort of the same thought process here. You're buying a small business, and just know sometimes you're gonna have to step up, and you can't necessarily outsource it all. But the pro, I think overall it's a pro, because it's plug and play. It's not it's not putting a ton of tremendous work on myself, especially if when you buy into a portfolio, they can usually prove that all the tenants are currently paying rent on time, and show you receipts and lease payments to make sure that they match. That all happens during the due diligence period, and it makes it really streamlined and quite easy if the previous property manager is pretty good. All right, so that's pro number one. Pro number two, you can scale quickly this way. A lot of people talk about, hey, I want to get more doors. And what they mean by that is, like, if you buy a duplex, they've got 2 doors. If they have 2 single family houses, they've got 2 doors. If you buy a 10-unit building, you've got 10 doors. And a lot of real estate investors kind of, that's their resume of such. And I do that a little bit too, just because that's what people ask me all the time. And if you want to scale quickly, buying a portfolio is the way to do that for sure. I'll put my I've got over 300 doors basically for doing this. And there's no way I could possibly scale as fast as I did without buying portfolios from people. And scaling, I've said this in many different ways on the show, scaling reduces risk. A lot of people say, hey, I'm just going to buy one, and then maybe I'll buy a second one. It seems too risky to buy a large portfolio. And that's not the way I think about it. I think about it as, no, the more properties I have, it lowers my risk. If one is vacant, if 10 are vacant, the more I have on the other side that aren't vacant, they're going to be carrying any sort of vacancies. If one property has very expensive repairs that month, I'll probably make up for it because I've got 200 properties that don't have expensive repairs that much, even though I budgeted for repairs on every single property. So it's just, you're spreading out the risk across more and more properties, and they all sort of support each other. And at one time, every property is going to have a vacancy at one time that's going to be supported by another property, and then it'll flip flop back and forth. Same with repairs. Some property will have unexpected repairs, but then you'll also have 15 other properties that haven't had repairs in 2 years, even though you budgeted for it, so it doesn't hurt as much. So a pro portfolio investing, you scale quickly, you scale fast, and you added benefit of reducing risk. So that's the way to grow in this business fast, especially if you subscribe to my philosophy of house fire, where you want one house to cover every single bill. Well, yeah, definitely you are going to quickly cover all your bills by buying portfolios from folks, because the best way to do that is scale. And once you buy one portfolio, you get a reputation of portfolio buyers. You get that experience, go around the House of AC real estate investing flywheel, and then you learn from it, and you rinse and repeat. You can grow so fast in this business buying portfolios. And like I said, it's all plug and play too. So it's like buying built-in pizza franchises with managers in place. I don't have experience in that though. So I'm assuming that's what Shaq and Peyton Manning do, because they've got a lot going on and they own 20 Papa John's each. So it's a way to scale and put people in place. All right. So here's another kind of good trick is that pro number 3 of portfolio investing. It can actually be easier to finance. Well, it is. It is easier to finance than if you were going to buy all these properties individually in most cases. So if you were going to buy, someone's selling 10 homes in a neighborhood and you wanted to get 10 different mortgages, that's going to be very, very expensive. You're going to have to do an appraisal on each one and underwritten on each one, put a down payment on each one, 10 different closings. It's just the time commitment is very difficult. It's going to kind of really drag things out. So you can finance these much easier through a commercial loan in most cases. It's either going to be a local community bank that's going to finance these. There's some sort of bank rule that they have to lend a certain amount of money within a radius of the bank, which goes really well. And so they really want to support the community, and they're going to lend to that community. And so what they're going to do is be happy to lend to you in most cases. So you can go there and they gave you something called a portfolio loan because they're going to give you one mortgage across all the properties. It's also referred to as a blanket loan. And, the way to think about it is you just making one mortgage payment and it covers 10 properties. You put up 10 properties for collateral. It's the same thing as getting one mortgage for one house. It's treated the same way. It's a blanket loan or portfolio loan. Now the things to consider is this will probably be a commercial loan. So you will have to put this in an LLC name. And a commercial loan usually is a variable loan with a 20-year amortization. So you probably will have to do a refinance every 5 to 7 years. Not always. There's other products out there, but just know it may be a little bit more expensive loan than if you did get 10 separate residential loans, but it'll be much easier to finance for you. So that is one nice way to get into this business. I got into I'd say about half of my portfolios have been seller financing. And what this is when it is difficult, it depends on the market conditions. It depends on the properties that you're buying. It depends on the local banks in the area or the hard money loans that are out there at the time. Sometimes these sellers have been trying to sell their portfolios for a while, and they'll eventually do a seller financing deal. And what that means is the seller becomes the mortgagee. They become the bank. And so you can get really creative. You can come up with any terms you want. It could be 0% down payment. I did one with 10% down payment on most of mine, 15-year note, 7% interest rate. That's the terms that this seller was willing to provide me. I love the 10% down because if I was doing a commercial loan, it would definitely have been 25% down most likely. And I couldn't get any other financing. And even though I was a qualified buyer, I just couldn't, the loan product just didn't exist in this market, and went to the seller and said, hey, listen, I still want to buy it, but I need your seller financing. So love the 10% down. I basically was able to buy $1 million worth of property for $100,000, which is absurd, right? A lot of people who have $100,000 invest, they want to buy a $100,000 house to make it risk-free. And this I was able to scale by 30 homes off the bat. 7% interest rate. Did not like that. That was obviously, he didn't want to seller finance, but he would for 7%. We know that mortgage interest rates right now are in the low 4s. And this was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and they were probably in the low 3s. So didn't love that, but love the 10% down. 15-year note. I also didn't love that. You want the longest note period as possible. 30 years would have been my preference. But at the end of the day, 10% down would create a huge mortgage balance and may sometimes on real estate investing make it difficult to cash flow. 7% interest rate, obviously higher than normal, sometimes makes it difficult to cash flow. And a 15-year amortization, 15-year fixed loan is also higher payments because you're making your payments over 15 years, $900,000 mortgage over 15 years instead of 30 years. So you have three whammies that were going to make it very difficult to cash flow. But when I ran it through a spreadsheet, I was still making a few $1,000s a month. So I was cash flowing a few $1,000s a month on top of these terms. So why not jump on it? So there's great strategies out there, and everyone listens to this and says, "I want to seller finance. How do I do that?" That's great. This will happen more often in these portfolio deals. Most people don't advertise they want to seller finance because they ideally they sell it and they move on, um, and you just have to basically find and ask. Find some portfolios that are struggling to sell that have been on the market for a while, um, and at the end of the day, the investor who's trying to sell may agree to it. So there's no way to do it, but except for get out there and hustle and try and see what sticks. That's it in a nutshell. Um, you could also try my mortgage lender, jasmineteam.com, jasminemortgageteam.com. I got a lot of mortgages through through portfolio, and that we did do those individually because interest rates were so low. So that's another option out there. Again, that's jasmineteam.com. So again, real estate investing always comes back to the tools in your tool belt, mostly around the tools of finance. So try local community banks, jasmineteam.com. Try hard money. There's a lot of hard money lenders out there. Lend Simply I've used before. Lending One I've used before. Lima One I've used before. Corvest I've used before. All these different offer now, recently they started offering portfolio loans. So go check out their websites. Their rates and terms change. It seems to be weekly. So depending when you're listening to this, you might have some great options and you might have some poor options, but you got to always know what's out there so that you can afford things. I always like to find the deal first and then figure out how am I going to afford it. It's and if the deal's good, I don't give up on it. And so I'll go through all those tools in my tool belt, and then I'll extend reaching out to partners, friends, investors, trying to raise money. And we're, possibly I'll just call clients and say, hey, I know you're looking to get in real estate investing, or you bought some of these in this town in the past. Here's a good deal for you. I can't make it work for me, but hopefully you can make it work. So again, it's just plain matchmaker and timing, but really understanding your finance. So that's pro number 3. So if you're just tuning in, I'm going to go through the 7 pros and the 7 cons of portfolio investing, and then tell you how to find some of these properties. And a portfolio is just more than one property. So pro number 1, you typically have property managers in place. Pro number 2, you scale up in size quickly and rapidly. Pro number 3, easier to finance in most cases than financing these properties individually. And 4 is a concentrated investment. What I mean by that, most successful portfolios that are at least sold and traded, it doesn't have to happen this way, but they typically have to have a common theme. Either they're all the same property type, they're all within the same zip code, they're all within a certain, radius of each other. Most cases, probably 95% of the time. Some of them are adjacent to each other, which is great. That's called an assemblage. If you can actually get 10 or 2 just that are next door to each other, that gives you more options, especially if you're going to renovate and rebuild, and you can combine those lots possibly down the road. But yeah, this concentration and why that's a pro. Well, it's nice because typically you can have one property manager manage the whole portfolio. If they're too spread out, or they're 2 different property types, one's commercial, one's residential, one's a mobile home park, and one's a townhouse, you may have to get different property managers in place that have different skill sets, things like that. So this is the concentration helps you in the property manager regards, but hopefully that property manager is already in place. But 2, imagine all the vendors. You can typically just find one plumber that you trust, one electrician that you trust, one yard guy, and it's just one vendor. And because of that, it's easier to manage because you don't have a list of vendors for each property that you've got to call and manage. You can just got one for the whole portfolio. So that concentration will make it a little bit easier for you on the management side, or if you have property managers, that they'll make it easier for them. Also, if you want to go view and see your home, you can go drive around, and hopefully they're close to each other. So that concentration is kind of nice. And also you become an expert when you have multiple properties in one area. you quickly become the expert of that area, and you may even become the market of that area. What I mean by that, if you have a highly concentrated portfolio, I've got 50 properties in the same town within 2 miles of each other. So I basically, in some regards, get to charge the rent in that area. I have a lot of pull in one market, and so you can do that too with these sort of portfolios, this concentration. So pro number 5 of investing in portfolios, single family portfolios or small multifamily portfolios, is that you can scale down your expenses when it comes to vendors and third party vendors. What I mean by that is when you first get started, you buy your first property. Typically, a property manager is going to charge you about 10%, 12%. But if you come to a property manager and say, "Hey, I've got 40 properties," really quickly, their rates become 4% to 5%, right? They want your business. And that's a great way to scale down your expenses quickly. The more you get, the more vendor discounts you get as well. The same goes with a contractor, a plumber, electrician in your portfolio. If you've got one property and you got a leaky toilet, that plumber, you know, he or she may get there when they can. They're not going to prioritize you, right? But if you're a client that has 10 houses in the same neighborhood and you call a plumber, and that plumber knows you're going to get repeat business and you're the one that you're going to call, I learned this in the field. Plumbers show up immediately now at any of my properties because they want to be the one on call, and they will drop their one-time clients all day to be their repeat client. So a lot of this goes really well. So that's sort of the so that and then they usually give you a discount, and they'll come with ideas, and they'll say, "Hey, I notice your gutters need to be cleaned on this property. Why don't I just clean all your gutters properties for this reduced price?" So you get a lot of benefits by having more than one property in the market, and that is pro number 5 for investing in single family homes. Pro number 6, selling off portions of it. So this is a little bit different than if you imagine you bought a 20 single family portfolio all in the same neighborhood. Some investors are saying, "Hey, if you're going to commercial invest in a 20 unit apartment building," right? There's pros and cons to all this, but the pro in the portfolio world, it would be, well, if you do want to sell one unit or one house in your portfolio, you can. And you can say, "I only need $100,000, or I hate this one property. It's just a pain in my butt. I'm just going to sell this one off and still keep a 19 home portfolio and keep everything in place." You can't do that in a 20 unit apartment building. You can't just say, "I'm going to sell unit 3 and and then still manage the other units." So that's a pro. That's, I would say, pro number 6. Is that you can sell off portions and you can siphon off of it. It's also, you can add to your portfolio quite easily, the reverse of that. So not just selling off, but adding to it. Again, if you buy a 20 unit apartment complex, there's really not much you can do to grow that portfolio except you go buy additional properties. And so here you can say, talk to your vendor, property manager, and they'll say, "Hey, I give you a discount when you get from 5 units to 10. Okay, well, now you've got a goal. You can go out and acquire 5 more properties within that area and reduce your expenses that way. All right, so and now the 7th pro of single family investing, and feel free to ask questions and comments as we go along here. You can leave comments on my YouTube page, Twitch, Discord, and Facebook as we go live here. So if you're watching on any of those formats, I will answer as we go. Pros, number 7. Again, I'm going through 7 pros, 7 cons, single family portfolio. 7 is 1031 tax options. So the reason a lot of people, they don't even realize they have a portfolio. They just sort of bought an investment property here and they bought another property there, and they don't know what to do next until they come across sort of the benefits of a 1031. So 1031 is a tax benefit that basically says if you made a lot of money, capital gains taxes can be deferred, snowballed to a later date, as long as you buy another property of equal or greater expense. So what happens is, if say I have two duplexes on either side of town, I could sell one and or I could go sell them separately, and then we pay taxes. And let's assume both of them are $300,000 each. Um, I could go sell them separately, or I could, and they might have different closing dates. One might sell, one might not sell. And then if they do both sell, I can mix those back together and say, well, I'm going to buy one property out of those two, $600,000 or more, and it just will defer the capital gains tax. But if I sell one property and the other one doesn't sell, then I don't have as much equity. I don't have as much money, so I can only 1031 half of those proceeds, and buy another $300,000 or more property. Again, not the end of the world, but if you can think of it this way, the timing matters. At a 1031, you have a hard timeline. In order to do it, you have to identify the properties that you want to replace it with within 45 days, and you have to close on one of them within 180 days. So you can imagine if you have two different sales going and two different timelines, and the buyers at different times and closing at a different time, it's going to be difficult to manage. So you can combine all those properties into one portfolio and say, hey, I'm going to sell this at once to one investor. And then that investor will just make those timing issues much easier for you. And also it'll confirm that you're selling them all at once. And so it'll be easier for you to 1031 because you get all your money at once, and all the timelines of those calendars all start starting at once as well. So to recap, investing in portfolio loans, the 7 pros are: 1, you typically already have property managers in place, which make it plug and play. 2, you can scale up in size quickly, so fast, by buying portfolios. 3, it's easier to finance a portfolio than it is to individually buy these homes all at once. 4, concentrated investment really makes your life a little bit easier in terms of management, vendors, visiting the properties as well. 5, cheaper vendors and property managers as you scale up, especially if it's all in one area and it is concentrated. You're going to get discounts, volume discounts on labor and materials as well. 6, you can sell off portions of the portfolio. It doesn't have to stay as a portfolio. So if you do want to siphon off some and sell, you do have that option. And 7, 1031 tax benefits. Those are the 7 pros investing in single family portfolios. All right. So that was a lot to cover and a lot to digest. I understand. Now we're going to cover the 7 cons of single family portfolio investing. And then if time permits, I'll show you a couple ways on how to search and buy some of these deals. Okay. So every investment has its pros and cons. There's no perfect investment there. Everyone wants to say, what should I invest in? Because I talk about investing in mobile home parks, storage units, single family portfolios, commercial apartment buildings, new construction, you name it. I've done it, and talk about it. And so every option has pros and cons, and I just like to show you both sides of the coin, and you decide what's for you. And a lot of times it's the opportunity will decide for you. You just see a screaming deal and you move on it, and then all of a sudden you become an expert in that field. So that happens to me quite often, just because I like the numbers in a spreadsheet, and I'll say, hey, let's go figure this out together. All right. So con number 1, these cons are basically in comparison to buying a equivalent size property that's all under one roof. But I mean, we talked about the pros of having 20 properties that are separated. Well, the alternative would be to buy an apartment building that has 20 units. Well, the con would be if you did have a building, you would only have to visit one place. A vendor would only have to go to one place. You only really have to have 1 million address, all this sort of stuff. You are going to be driving around town in some capacity with a portfolio. Even if it's all in one street, it's not as easy as driving into one building. So con number 1, investing in single family portfolios, you are in most cases driving around all over town when compared to it being concentrated in one building. Not a deal breaker, but it makes it a little bit more difficult if you got to run an errand an hour in between meetings. you really typically will have to make a half a day out of it, or a full day, or just wait for the weekend so that you can go do every little knickknack at every single property, or open the door, or have the property manager give you updates on every single property instead of just like one building itself. So that's definitely a con to consider when con number one of seven. Con number two, more expenses in CapEx. So capital expenditures are things to sort of maintain the building, big ticket items, things that you need to budget for. Obviously, if you've got 20 properties, you got 20 roofs to worry about. Roofs, water heaters, HVACs, those are typically the most expensive things. Well, if you got 20 portfolio, you've got 20 roofs, 20 property taxes, 20 HVACs, 20 driveways to shovel, 20 lawns to landscape. All these things, you're scaling up your expenses. We talked about in the pro, you're scaling down your expenses when it comes to vendors, but your CapEx and sort of maybe your maintenance, it will definitely, your maintenance will go up to offset the savings that you made on the vendor side. So this is the biggest pro that apartment complex investors have is, hey, I only have to worry about one roof, one property tax bill, one landscaping bill, instead of 20. So that's definitely a con to be aware of when you are buying in portfolios. Con number three, harder to refinance. This can be difficult because it's an unusual product. It's not a traditional one loan like it would be an apartment building. It's all about what the local bank's offerings are at that moment. So if the interest rates really drop, you might not be able to take advantage of it if you can't find anyone to do a refinance across your entire portfolio. You may have to go hard money. Like I said earlier, hard money can be very creative on the purchase side. A lot of them might have short-term loans, or a commercial loan will make you refinance every 5 years. And there is some risk that you're not going to know what those products are in the future, or product terms are, or even if they do exist when it is time to refinance. Most cases, the lender who gave you the original loan will refinance it as long as you've been making payments the whole time. But if you're looking for a better rate, or switching banks, or anything along those lines, banks and hard money lenders, they change their terms all the time. They go in and out of business, and it may be difficult to refinance when that day comes due. So please be aware of that as a major con in portfolio investing. Along those same lines as con number four, there's going to be fewer buyers who want to buy 20 of something than there is that want to buy one of something, right? So if you do want to sell, you could sell off individually. That's a con. But you also will probably want to also offer seller financing in many cases. So that was a pro on buying and getting in on these properties, that you can get some seller financing. It's going to be a con in getting out of these properties. You may have to offer seller financing. So what's the con in seller financing? Well, you can't 1031 if you're offering seller financing, because seller financing is basically said you got this big windfall of money, and you're going to reinvest it, and within 150 days or whatever. You can't do that with seller finance because you don't get that big windfall. You basically get a small little down payment, 10%, possibly, and then they're going to be making monthly payments to you. And it's nice. It'll actually feel just like you're getting rental income, except you don't have any of the work and you don't have any repairs, just because someone's making their mortgage payment to you, and it's going to be fixed. So there are some benefits to that, but if you're the bank, if you're the seller financing and the person forecloses, then you've got to go after them and take all these properties back, and you thought they were gone with, and now they're back on your plate. So those are things to realize on the exit of these properties. You may have to be the one offering seller financing, especially if you had to, the only way to get in on it was through seller financing. So take that into consideration. Con number five, it can be difficult to offload one or more of these properties. So I know as a pro that you could offload one or more of these, and it is. Just think of it this way, though. If you have a blanket loan or a portfolio loan, what that is going in, and those products exist, and it's very common. what that is saying, hey, I want to buy all 10 properties and I want one mortgage. And they give you, they underwrite it across the whole portfolio, the whole package, how much rent income it has, and your down payment. Now, if that is your financing going in and you want to sell one of those properties, one of those 10, you have to refinance the whole deal because you were underwritten with 10 homes. So now if you want to get rid of one, you have to refinance across the other 9. Depending on the situation, the bank might say, yes, we'll release number 9 because you paid down enough of your note or you put another equity. You may actually have to bring money to the table so that they don't have to do a full refinance, just so that they can keep the loan in place and reduce it from collateral of 10 properties to 9. They may ask for more money. So keep that in mind when you do sell off one property. And it can be a huge headache because if you do move forward with refinance, what typically happens is now they've got to send an appraiser out to all 9 properties. They've got to underwrite you in the current your financial situation. So if you recently retired or something, could change off all your numbers, and it's not going to be a 30-day close when you sell that one property. So keep that in mind. It's very difficult to sell one property if you're using a portfolio loan or a blanket loan going in, just for all those reasons I described. All right. Con number 6. Sometimes you have to sell at a discount on some of your properties. So I've done this. I've sold a portfolio of 3 homes. It was one flanked on the left. It was a duplex in the left, single family in the middle, and a duplex on the right. Assemblage, a lot of assemblage across all 3. And no one wanted that single family in the middle. It needed a lot of work. It was basically, it wasn't even a $30,000 house. Everything just needed to be done. There was someone living in it, paying rent, and they were comfortable. It was safe, but it was just something I would never be able to sell. And but I found one person who wanted to buy both sides of the duplexes, and so basically I just give them a free house. I said, listen, I don't want to negotiate on price on the duplexes. Because they wanted to come off like 10,000 on both properties. And I said, listen, it's list price. I'm firm, but I'll throw in a free house in the middle. And that got the deal done. So a lot of times if you're selling a portfolio, you have to sell it at a discount because everyone wants to cherry pick. I do the same. When someone sells a portfolio, I'll say, hey, I see your portfolio of 20 homes, but I like these 8. And they're going to say, sorry, you got to buy them all. And so either in order for me to buy them all, to justify for me to get excited by that 8, I may have to really would offer a much lower discounted rate for the other 12. And sometimes they take it, sometimes don't. But just realize your buyers are not going to treat every property equally, and they're definitely going to prefer some over the others. And you may have to throw in some houses or deeply discount some of those houses within that bundle. So far, we've covered 6 cons. We started with the 7 pros at the beginning of the episode. Now we're into seventh con. Con number 1, driving all over town in most cases because you're not concentrated in one building. Con number 2, more expenses and capital expenditures because you've got 20 property taxes and 20 that's not capex, but 20 roofs, 20 plumbing issues, 20 hot water heaters, things like that. Con number 3, harder to refinance. Typically you have to do hard money or whatever local bank options are. Con number 4, may have to provide seller financing in order to exit. So in that case, you will not be able to 1031, which is a huge benefit as a real estate investor selling. Con number 5, can be difficult to offload one property. If you got in with a blanket loan or portfolio loan, you may have to refinance every property and it's not going to take 30 days to close. Con number 6, sometimes you have to discount some of your properties in order to package it together. You got the good stuff and the bad stuff. Let's package it all together and sell them some medium stuff. And con number 7 is inheritance is a pain in the butt. Most of the portfolios that I buy are this conversation with the seller. Hey, so why are you selling these properties? Oh, I want to retire and my kids want nothing to do with it. And I get that. Imagine dumping 50 properties of varying shape all over town on to your heirs who have no interest in real estate, have no experience in real estate, and have no idea what's going on. Like I just spent so far 40 minutes going through the pros and cons of this, and I'm sure if you're listening, you understand real estate, and your head might be swimming. So imagine dumping these properties on someone who doesn't. However, the alternative, imagine if you had the exact same number of doors, same portfolio value, um, in one building. That's much easier to understand. It's much easier to sell if you're if they want to sell. It's much easier to keep in a trust if you want to keep in a trust. Um, it's just simpler in inheritance, and things along those lines. So that's something to consider. I get a lot of my portfolios from people retiring and their children are not interested. So I have that in my mindset too, as well. So I'm trying to exit some of my portfolios, uh, mainly because of that. I'm like, well, why am I doing this? I'm doing it for, you know, creating wealth for my family and my children's families. I want to make it easier for them in case I pass away, and my wife does too. So that is another reason to really kind of think of it. And that's what I was saying, that I came up with another pro, but now I've lost it. Maybe it'll come back to me. Buying these single family homes. It had to do with inheritance. Um, anyway, so there you go. 7 pros, 7 cons, single family investing. Run through those pros one last time. If you're just joining, 7 pros, typically a property manager is in place, so it's plug and play. 2, scale up in size fast and quickly. As a real estate investor, you can grow the number of doors and assets under management so fast buying portfolios. 3, easier to finance than it would be individually. Sometimes you get seller financing on the way in. 4, concentrated investment. It's usually all in the same zip code, area, or property type. 5, cheaper vendors and property managers. You get to scale down expenses on the vendor side. 6, you can sell off portions, non-performing ones, things you don't like, instead of the whole package at once. And 7, you got a lot of 1031 tax options. There you go. So now that we've covered the 7 pros and 7 cons, how do we buy? How do we look for these properties? So those sticking around may be asking those questions. Well, I'll show you exactly the 2 resources I use most. Sometimes it's the FMLS. That's what it's called here in Atlanta, but the MLS is your city, your country, your state probably has a multiple listing service that collects everything that's for sale within your community. I got a great discount when I was buying those properties for, what was it, $27,000 each in a bundle, because they were listed individually on the MLS at $27,000 each, and it wasn't selling. I don't know for sure why, but I assume one of the big reasons was, hey, if you're looking for $27,000 properties, and you go in and you look at this listing, you mark it, oh, I like it, and then the fine print in the realtor note says must buy 30 of them. Then you're just going to discard it, right? But if you're $1 million investor and you've got $1 million budget, and you are not going to be looking at $27,000 homes, right? Your filter on the MLS will be $1 million, 900,000 to a million, or 900,000 to 1.1, or whatever it is. And so those things are never going to be on your radar. So I got lucky on that first one. Actually, a friend of mine brought it to me and said, hey, I was looking at $29,000 homes, and do you want to partner on this? Because I've got to buy 30 of them. That's the only way that they'll sell it. So that's one way I found the properties. And then, of course, guess what happens? We bought all 30 of those. I'm a realtor on 30 transactions, all within 2 miles, all within the same zip code. And so every other wholesaler, every other real estate investor who's got a portfolio to sell, any sort of real estate agent who's looking for a buyer for their portfolios, or want to know about agents in the neighborhood, it's like, oh, dang, Alan Corey sold the last 30 homes in this zip code. Granted, I closed all of them on the same day, but every comp that they pulled up, I was just getting calls. You're like, Alan, you're the agent that represented every call. Do you have a buyer for these properties? Because I've got very similar buyers. I'm running comps because I have a listing coming up. I'm a wholesaler, and I know you've got a represented a buyer. So I was a realtor in that case, and I was the buyer in that case. But even if you use a real estate agent to do this, and you're not a licensed real estate agent, they will be getting those calls, and they'll say, "Hey, you bought 5 homes recently in this area. Who's your buyer? Because I've got another property that is similar to the 5 that you just bought. So there's benefits of just like doing stuff. Benefits of doing stuff. If you're out there doing stuff, the deals will start finding you. And that's how I grew within this town from 30 to 20 people calling me. So the next 20 I bought, they called me. And that was probably 5 different people over the next year and a half called me. So in their portfolios, and my name just kept coming up. Sometimes as a buyer and sometimes the real estate agent. So as long as your real estate agent knows you're looking for portfolios and you've bought in the past, that your real estate agent will be getting those calls too. So those are ways I found it. And then there's other ways outside of that. Let's look at, before we get there, I've also helped clients buy a duplex. And a simple question is, oh, hey, someone who's buying a duplex, do you have other duplexes for sale? And that conversation opens up sometimes a goodie bag where they're like, well, yeah, this investor owns 10 duplexes on the same street. We were just going to sell one at a time. And so we can have a comp and things like that. And so we've opened up conversations. We've taken 3 or 4 at a time. So I've done those for clients as well. Many different ways. There's no surefire way to find single family portfolios or any sort of portfolios. But let me share my screen here. Here's some 2 other ways that I've done it. There's a website called LoopNet. LOOPNET, loopnet.com. It's a Zillow of commercial properties. I just do the entire United States. Go to filters here. I'm sharing my screen. So those listening on the podcast, just click multifamily up here. You can kind of narrow it down in these subsections, but really all you got to do is go down here and I exclude condos. Condos are difficult because typically you don't own the entire building, and I'd want to hold the entire building, or at least 51% of the units in a condo, and then at least I can control the HOA board and I get to make the rules and own all the votes that way. But sometimes if you own more than 51%, lenders will not lend on the other 49 units, 49% of the units, just for that reason, because someone has too much power. So anyway, that's a tangent, but I exclude condos, and then I just search portfolios only. It's one of the filters on LoopNet. You just search multifamily and portfolios only, click search. And obviously you can narrow this down into different parts of the world, price points, things like that. These look like little advertised options. And so I'm just going to read a little bit what I see on the screen here. And let me make this a little bit bigger for those watching on mobile. All right. You'll just have several listings here. Here you go. 5 multifamily properties, multiple locations. So this one does not necessarily seem concentrated, but that's 16 million, 7% cap. Wow, this is 127 high quality late model community owned homes at 97% rental capacity. These look like multifamily mobile homes. That's why there's so many of them. Yeah, mobile home community, MHC, if you see those initials. So this is I said single family home portfolio, but this is portfolio buying. You can buy these mobile homes. The benefits of mobile homes, if this is something you're considering, you as a landlord typically only are responsible for the land. The mobile home is owned and operated by the owner. They park their mobile home on it and they just rent the lot from you, the $500 a month, the parking space. So you don't really have to worry about utilities, repairs, things like that. Obviously, mobile home parks typically come with low income tenants, which every tenant of class is good and bad, but obviously if they have a medical emergency, lose their job, the safety net might be on the lower end. I'm theorizing, I'm generalizing. Obviously that's not the case for everyone, but those things are definitely a concern I've heard from other mobile home community owners. Here is 2 multifamily properties, two garden style properties. So this is not a single family property here, that listing that I'm looking at. This is in Houston, Texas for $5.7 million. You get an apartment complex for 46 units and another apartment complex for 29 units. So that's a portfolio that you can buy together. Let me try to find some that are single family here. 4 properties mixed type, 2 million, 174 properties in Rochester, New York. 213 units. So it tells me 174 properties, but 213 units. So that tells me most of these are single families. Obviously, this price point's really high, $13.5 million. Talking about scaling, right? You can just jump in here and scale. Imagine getting seller financing on a deal like this. You will be the king of Rochester, New York. Instantly become the market leader. What you charge and rent will really sway the entire town. That many properties. A lot of these are multifamily here. I'm trying to, maybe that was the filter. I did check multifamily, so maybe that's why. But you get the idea. You can find property. Here's Columbus, Ohio, $1,150,000, 5 multifamily properties, 10 fully renovated units over 5 properties. So this looks like roughly 5 duplexes. The addresses here: 18th Avenue, 15th Avenue, Clarendon, 14th, 16th. So just looking at this, they're all not in a row. They're spread out over town. They all seem to be built in around the 1920s, all similar size, close to 2,400 square feet. So it's all similar product type. You probably can get away with the same property manager, the same, vendors, the plumbers, things like that. There's not a whole lot of photos on this listing. Okay, let's see what else we have. This is a more reasonable price point in Detroit, Michigan. 4 multifamily properties for $550,000. And again, I say reasonable, and your eyes might be spinning your head that I've said that this is reasonable. But a lot of lenders, especially when you're getting a commercial loan, they don't give you a loan based on your personal finances. They give you a loan on the finances of the income that these properties are spitting out. And so it's much easier to get financing this way. All right, so here's some of these Detroit photos are all boarded up, so that's maybe why that's a cheaper side. Multiple redevelopment properties. The portfolio closed 2 4 units, 1 2 unit, 1 single family. But these all seem to be on the same street, so at least you get 4 in the same street, so you can really kind of own that street. It's a good way to get in. So that's another way. LoopNet is what I'm looking through and talking through. I'll show you another website that I use, do something similar. This is called Crexi. Crexi is CREXI.com, Crexi.com. It's also, they're basically similar to LoopNet. The commercial version of Zillow is another way to look at it. I just went in here, multifamily. They actually have a subset on their search where you can check single family rental portfolio. And let me see if I can, I'm trying to find something that may be a little bit, under $500,000 here. And we can walk through and what it looks like. There's a townhome community, 8 units. That's 5.8 million. That's not going to work. Well, you know what? I should just sort my price. Let's say 600,000 max price here. I don't want an email about it. Okay. All right. $359,000, Waynesville, North Carolina. What do we get here? This is a brick ranch. This looks like it's a single family listed. I don't know. Let's look at this flyer here. It's listed under multifamily. Oh, no. Okay. It's multiple homes on low. No, 359. This is just poorly listed. Talk about great ways to find listings. Bad data in the MLS system or on Zillow, Crexi, LoopNet. Huge opportunity. If you can find bad data here, because you're like, why is this not selling? Why Billy Case, agent, he might be saying, why is this not selling? Well, if you've got it listed as a multifamily and it's a single family, those deals, you can find a dozen a day on these things if you have the patience to go through it. All right. 7 units, Corpus Christi, Texas, $229,000. Value add opportunity. Value add basically means you can fix it up and possibly refinance it and pull some money back. The 7-unit apartment complex. So that's not a single family portfolio. Again, this is poorly listed under single family portfolio. That's what I checked, right? I only want single family portfolio rentals. Not showing up for me. Lawton, Oklahoma for 100 and what was this? Oh, I've run out of my free searches on Crexy. But that was $130,000 for 7 units in Oklahoma. So a lot of those people, if you're listening, I mean, think of it that way: $100,000 portfolio, you get 7 units in Oklahoma. It probably already is rented out. It's plug and play. You got your property managers, people in place, and you get a commercial loan with 25% down. Talk about scaling up. You're going to have 25 properties. I'm sorry, you're going to take 7 properties for $25,000. And if one's vacant, the other 6 are going to prop them up. So it really does reduce risk. So there you go, guys. That's my hour-long breakdown of single-family portfolios. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in live. I see you. Not a lot of questions today, but maybe you'll come back with questions when you dig deeper into this. Like me on YouTube. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, at The House of AC. Go to Linktree/The House of AC. If you want to get a mortgage, JasmineMortgageTeam.com is who I use personally and who I recommend often. So thanks for tuning in to The House of AC. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one, guys.